It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com. On the line this morning with Paul Andrew Hutton, the author of the book, The Undiscovered Country. And what a great, great book it is. It's all about America's expansion into the West, and it's just a brilliant read. The news story of the West, and 7 lives are examined here, but there are so many other lives that we want to talk with him about. Our visit presented by Marcus & Mack, voted Best Law Firm and Best Personal Injury Lawyer 3 years in a row, and the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Paul, good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be with you.
It's wonderful to have you with us. The Undiscovered Country actually begins right here in this very neighborhood in which we're standing today in Indiana, PA, because George Washington and General Braddock and everybody that's involved in that early part of the French and Indian War, that all began right here, and that's where you begin your book.
It is. It's where I begin the book. As you mentioned, it's 7 lives, and the first one is Daniel Boone, and Daniel Boone was with Braddock. And so that I just thought this is a great place to start. And then I must tell you, once I got, and I knew the history, but not in the kind of detail you have to know, when you're writing a book. And once I got into it, I just got completely obsessed with it. And it's just so rich and exciting. All the things that happened.
Triumph, Tragedy, and the Shaping of the American West. That's the subtitle to the book, Undiscovered Country. And you're right. There's a ton of all of that within the book. And the personalities. I love the primitive nature of the Daniel Boone story because it really echoes the primitive nature of America, expanding into, particularly we're talking here about Kentucky, and the trailblazing work, literal trailblazing, done by Daniel Boone. I don't think people realize how much of a key role he played in the beginning of this country.
Well, I really consider him the sort of Western founding father. He is sort of an American Moses, who's obsessed with leading the people into this new paradise as he saw it. And he paid a terrible price. He lost 2 sons, a brother and a brother-in-law, in his effort to settle Kentucky. And then, of course, after all of his struggles and adventures in doing so, he found himself out of place in the territory he had established and moves west to Missouri. He said he needed elbow room. Too many people in Kentucky, but he was also beset by lawsuits over land claims and just felt that he needed to move on. And that's kind of the story of all of these people who press westward. They're reinventing themselves. They're starting over, and that's what the West really offered to America, and it really affected the American character, who we are as a people, how we identify ourselves, and that's one of the themes I tried to develop in the book. I don't think I hit that too hard because the book is ultimately, I hope, an adventure story. I mean, I believe that history is stories, and this is a tale of high adventure.
It really is. Daniel Boone, of course, is a very familiar name to Americans. Davy Crockett is another of those 7 lives, and Buffalo Bill Cody. Just the number of folks that we get to meet through this book, and it starts with General Braddock, but it moves all the way through the expansion of America to the West, and it really is fascinating to me. One of the stories that I enjoyed most of all, because he's a guy that seems to float through a lot of the books that you read of in the 1700s and the 1800s, is John Fremont. John Fremont, to me, was a fascinating character.
Absolutely, and he's sort of forgotten in American history when you think about how important he was. Now, out here in Wyoming, there's lots of places named for him, and of course, he opened up this country, explored it. And people don't remember that he was the first Republican candidate for president of the United States, lost the election to James Buchanan. That shows that the voters really can be wrong. And Buchanan, of course, turned out to be the worst president we've ever had. He gets the number 1 spot, and everyone else fights over number 2. But Fremont through his expeditions, really opened up the West, and his reports of his expeditions kind of became the AAA guidebook for pioneers on those wagon trains going across the Oregon and California trails.
We meet so many people in this book. Fremont's story is so appealing to me because of the speed with which he made it not only to California, but back to California. And you give us a sense in the reading of the book, The Undiscovered Country, of how difficult travel was in that day and how long it took to go from one place to the other, but at the same time about how so quickly these people moved from place to place. It really was an amazing accomplishment.
Well, the story of the migration west is a story about people that are seeking, of course, something new, something better, and also, of course, the story of the people who were already there who resisted that advance. And in fact, the title, "The Undiscovered Country," of course, it's from Hamlet, and it's from the soliloquy, and Hamlet's talking about death, but he's also talking about discovering something new, having the courage to strike out and do something entirely new. And that's the whole story running through these generations that I talk about, going all the way from Braddock's defeat, Daniel Boone, to Buffalo Bill Cody, Sitting Bull, and the Wounded Knee Massacre.
We are actually going from the revolutionaries generation to the next generation and beyond that as well. And that brings in the concept of manifest destiny, which probably we all learned when we were in school and forgot about very quickly. But in its day, manifest destiny as not just a catchphrase, but a philosophy, really did help shape the American West.
Oh, it absolutely did. And it was the sort of political platform of James K. Polk, who I think is one of the most underrated presidents in American history. He really should be in the top 5. He more than doubled the size of the nation, fulfilled our continental destiny. We would not be the rich and great power we are today if it wasn't for James K. Polk. He doesn't get a lot of credit; he gets a lot of blame. But manifest destiny was the idea that Americans were destined, either by God or by nature, to overspread the entire continent. It was nothing new. We saw it with the Pilgrims and their idea of a city upon a hill that would be a beacon to the whole world. It was part of what caused the War of 1812. We wanted to take Canada. And it then, of course, became climactic in the 1830s and 1840s with the movement into Texas, the Oregon country, California. And Polk was the one who pushed it through. People like Fremont and Kit Carson, of course, were his agents of destiny.
Yeah, one of the, of course, tragic elements of the entire story is that, yes, we talk about the undiscovered country, but that would have been news to those who were already living there. And that's the source of much of the conflict in the forming of America as we know it today.
Yeah, and I used 3 lives, Native American lives. Red Eagle, who was the chief of the Creek Confederacy that fought with the British in the War of 1812 against the Americans. Mangus Colorados, who united all the Apache tribes against the Americans. And, of course, Sitting Bull, one of the most famous of all the Indian leaders, who, of course, led the Sioux at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Custer's last stand. And then, amazingly, toured with Buffalo Bill Cody in the Wild West show before, again, coming into conflict with the government and in a botched arrest was killed. And that's set off the tragedy that became the Wounded Knee Massacre.
Yeah, it's really an intricate story. And to see the connection that you're able to draw from one event to the other, you've got the Seminoles and the Creek Wars. You've got Mexico and Texas and the forming of the Texas Republic. But each of these events have almost a natural line that goes through them all to draw that connection. And you can't get to California without getting the story of Florida and Louisiana and Texas and the western United States. In order to get there, you got to pull on that string.
Well, and that's why I used the 7 lives. I thought that would be a good organizing principle. Now, I love biography, and I've written biographies before, but I thought if I'll organize this story around the lives, and I'll tell it as a generational story, and so I picked individuals who would help me both in terms of the history involved, but also in terms of the geography. You know, where are we? How do I tell the story of the West? Now, obviously, I had to leave some things out. It's a big book, but you can't have everything in it, and those were hard choices to make. But I think this experiment worked very well in terms of moving the story along. You know, when I write, sometimes I listen to movie soundtracks, and one of my favorite is How the West Was Won from 1962, and I sometimes thought, my goodness, I'm writing How the West Was Won, and of course also How the West Was Lost in this book.
Well, as I talk to you, I'm right across the street from the Jimmy Stewart Museum, and the home in which he grew up is, I can see the tip of the roof, and he was a big part of that movie, How the West Was Won. And it's interesting you say that, because so many times in reading your book, I hearkened back to that movie and some of the scenes and the way that narrative moved forward. You basically use that same sort of technique in order to move your narrative forward.
Yeah, I do. It's a useful structure, and I think they did. James Webb was the screenwriter of that movie. I think he did a great job, and he used a single family in his story, but of course there were many other lives that intersected with them. And Jimmy Stewart played a mountain man in it, of course, and was a great role. And I thought, you know, that'll work. That'll work as a way to tell a story this big. You know, it's 150 years of history. You know, which in terms of world history isn't that much, but of course is more than half of our country's history.
It's an amazing effort by you. Just a wonderful book, The Undiscovered Country, Triumph, Tragedy, and the Shaping of the American West. And we're so grateful that you have come up with this. Paul Andrew Hutton joining us here this morning on Indiana in the Morning. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you having me on, and thanks for your kind words about the book.
Have a great day today.